Now, whatever happens as a result of today's election in the United States, it's going to be historic. Either Kamala Harris is going to become the first U.S. female president and only the second president of mixed race, or Donald Trump will stage one of the only presidential comebacks in history and will also become the first convicted felon to hold that office. Today, America decides, and the whole world is watching. Such is the power and influence of the United States. It hasn't come cheaply. $3.5 billion have been spent on advertisements alone. It's thought the overall cost of the race this time around is about $16 billion, making it the most expensive election cycle ever. Kamala Harris wrapped up her campaign with a final rally in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which had Oprah Winfrey, Katy Perry, and Lady Gaga in attendance. Donald Trump was also in Pennsylvania last night, in Pittsburgh, where he also secured some celebrity endorsements before heading for one last stop in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he ended his campaign. Let's take a listen to the closing pitches of the two candidates.
We don't have to settle for weakness and incompetence and decline and decay. That's a nice word, decay. That's what's happening. That's a nice word, decay. Can you imagine? And nobody will question it because it's true. With your vote tomorrow, we can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America and lead the world to new heights of glory. But indeed, think of that statement, how beautiful that is. New heights of glory, that's what's going to happen. When we win the election and we're really, well, look, the ball's in our hand.
Pittsburgh! Are we ready to do this? Are we ready to vote? Are we ready to win?
Just tell us what you've been doing today and what the mood is like where you are in this very sort of consequential election.
Yeah, it's a really interesting day. I voted early, I think as many Americans do these days, by mail, or you can often go to the polls and vote a week ahead or so. So it is possible to vote early. But right now, I mean, today, the electioning essentially stopped yesterday in terms of the candidates going out. Right up until I think 2 a.m. is when Trump finished his final rally. And so today, I mean, there's a lot going on social media that people are tracking, and we're trying to get a feel for who's actually showing up to the polls today. If it's more women, it's indicative that it will be a better day for Kamala Harris, and if it's fewer women, then obviously Trump may have an edge. So it's all very close, and there's a lot of speculation going on, but nobody really knows.
Can you imagine? But do you agree with those who say that this has been a most extraordinary election campaign? I mean, there were two attempts on the life of Donald Trump. Midstream, the president pulled out of the race in favor of Kamala Harris.
It's been extremely unusual. Yes, you're absolutely right about that. And interestingly, the two attempts, I mean, what we know about the two attempted assassins is they were both Republicans. So it's really kind of crazy. At the same time, you have Trump, I would say, is really run a very aggressive campaign that's, essentially saying that he's going to be throwing his opponents in jail after he gets elected and so on. And that's obviously disturbing, but I think he said that in the past. It didn't actually happen, but you never know. And then, of course, Harris has been trying to portray herself as being inclusive. And interestingly, in her final rallies, for example, she said, "We're not creating enemies here. We're trying to." We're planning to put Republicans at the table. So she's trying to be as inclusive as possible. She's reached out to the Republicans and had several hundred prominent Republicans endorse her candidacy this time. So it's clear that the political establishment supports Harris, largely from the Republicans and Democrats. But Trump has his essentially this incredible base of support, especially from the rural areas, that will carry him and make it a close race no matter what.
And that's the U.S. military and current affairs analyst Doug Brooks speaking to me earlier from Washington. And now for his take on the American ballot, I'm joined now in the studio by the international businessman, political analyst, and 2023 presidential candidate of the Young Progressive Party, or YPP, Prince Malik Ado-Ibrahim, who is now also the honorary consul of Kazakhstan to Nigeria and a clutch of other West African countries. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you, Pat.
Nice to see you again.
You too. You too.
So essentially they've handed over to the voters now, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, and this is going to be a decisive day, isn't it? It's now all about getting the voters to go to the polling booths.
I think that is what excites me about this election, is that the people will decide. I like the fact that there are two parties, unlike our 18 or so, and there are different ideologies, and those ideologies have been put in front of everybody to see. I'm not sure I completely agree with either party coming from a political standpoint of how this affects us as Africans. But the US elections do create a lot of buzz globally, and that allows us to be able to really participate from a gallery point of view as to how elections can be run and won, and how they can also be lost. So a great spectacle for Nigerians, but for the global stance, I'm very solid about my ideas that the Democrats are better for Africa than Mr. Trump. He showed himself, has called us all sorts of names and some kinds of holes. But I'm a great believer that although I do know the Democrat presidential candidate when I was in California and she was the district attorney there. And although I don't agree with the politics that they're having now, the feeling I have is that she's better for us as Africans, and their global views on some things like LGBTQ and just trying to pull Africans into a different kind of world is things I don't agree with. But I think on the whole, it's better for us as Africans, and I can only speak from that perspective. So
yeah, no, I completely understand that. But I mean, you mentioned Nigeria. Of course, one of the touchline issues of this election is immigration, isn't it? And there are a lot of Nigerians who would like to emigrate to the US, legally or illegally. How is that issue of tougher immigration rules and visa applications, for example, especially if Donald Trump wins, being seen by Nigerians?
Well, I think it's from that perspective, it's for those who want to immigrate to the United States. Trump is definitely a no-no, somebody who they would not like to see in office. The Nigerians that are in the diaspora and those that are in the US at the very top of the ladder, I don't think the migration there is seen. I think our PR makes it look bad as a country, but the cream of the crop in the US as migrants, Nigeria is very much at the top there. And those are very professional individuals. I wish they were home with us doing good things, but we see that the US provides opportunities that we can't give here. But I'd like to see a tougher stance on us not letting the brain drain go to the US. But yes, for those who want to live, I think the US, the presidential elections, having put Trump in there is going to be very negative for them in that sense. Yeah.
Let's move away from Nigeria specifically and tap your sort of knowledge and experience with sort of international affairs. What about things like the war in the Middle East? I understand, I mean, some people are drawn to Donald Trump, people in Nigeria, because of what they perceive to be his position on the war there. I mean, Nigeria is kind of divided, Christians, Muslims,
yes.
some people taking sides and so on. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a very unfortunate situation for us to be globally, to be watching what's going on in Ukraine and having a viewpoint on that being a very white affair versus what's going on in the Middle East as a very mixed affair between whites and the non-whites. And that's one side of looking at it. And then you have the religious side of the other thing, the Orthodox Christians, and that drive of Christianity is not an issue for the Ukraine war. It's more sort of geopolitical adjustment.
Absolutely.
But in the Middle East, the Palestinians are Muslims and Christians, and we can't look at it from that standpoint. Iran muddies
and
the water.
Lebanese as well.
Absolutely,
I mean,
the
Lebanese
Christians, exactly. And when you look at what's going on, it's for me just an absolute tragedy that a country can go and invade another country and there's silence. There's uproar in Ukraine, but there's absolute silence in Lebanon. I don't think there is a Nigerian that has a clear path to understanding this that will not feel for that situation. But cities are being destroyed willy-nilly and nobody's saying anything about it. And that also shows where the global divide is, and I will try and pigeonhole it as an African issue. The US is focused on too many different battles at the moment. So the US elections for me are not consequential to us as Africans. The battle in the Ukraine, they've got to focus there. The battle in the Middle East, they've got to focus there. They're keeping an eye on China. They've got BRICS going on. Africa is not even in their line of sight at the moment. And I think that is where I'm most disappointed in us as Nigerians. We haven't taken that moral authority that we used to have as the leaders of Africa. This is the time when our foreign policy should be there to bring other African countries together,
rally
and lead,
people,
absolutely, and show the strength of us as Nigerians. Instead, we're having borderline battles with our neighbors. Our concentric circles of peace and protection are being decimated. You've got countries that are not looking at Nigeria's position and being in awe, but more challenging us for global, the national and global viewpoint as African leaders. Angola is trying to present itself as a defense partner for the US and posturing itself there. Nigeria has not been able to take that mantle that we typically have had.
Yeah, it's very disappointing, isn't it? But you mentioned Ukraine there. Is there a sense here in Nigeria that Mr. Trump may have the willpower to end the Russia-Ukraine war? Or do people place greater trust in Kamala Harris in that regard? Because, I mean, he said he's going to end the war, whatever it takes.
Yes.
Whereas Kamala Harris intends to continue giving support to Ukraine to continue the war.
The Ukraine war, for want of a better term, is white-on-white crime as far as I'm concerned. They're doing to themselves as they've been doing to others for many centuries. And I, as much as I sympathize with the loss of life, it is a war that is unnecessary and could have ended a long time ago. Trump coming in is not going to make much of a difference, I don't think. Yes, you can shout all he can do is saying, I'm not giving you arms anymore. That doesn't mean the Europeans won't get involved. We know his anti-NATO stance is very strong, so we're not particularly understanding where he might fit in this whole thing. He's got a reputation as not being a warmonger, but in order to feed the American system, the military-industrial complex of America needs to be churning, and there needs to be battles, there need to be tanks, they need to be selling weapons, they need to be selling Iron Dome missiles. That's why they don't focus on Africa. The conflict here does not.
No, but it's not going to stop them from selling it. At the moment, they're not actually selling to Ukraine.
No, they're not.
They're sort of
donating
it to Ukraine. Although you're right, it's still churning. It's still keeping the industrial complex within America ticking over,
and the Israeli
and feeding into the economy. There.
And that's where the U.S. economy gains a lot from that issue.
Okay, let's move away from that and talk a little bit about climate change, because I know you are into renewable energy and that sort of thing. Climate change already affecting parts of this country, especially the north. I mean, the feeling seems to be, certainly amongst environmentalists, that Nigeria would be better off if Kamala Harris wins, because she would likely prioritize climate cooperation and would be more likely to maintain beneficial climate policies than Donald Trump. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Before we go and start getting aid or assistance from other countries, we need to have our own policies in line. We haven't taken full advantage of the $37 billion that the COP 29 or 28 will have given us, and we haven't even prepared ourselves.
I remember you made that point before,
absolutely,
and they still haven't.
They still haven't done it. We're experiencing incredible irradiation from the sun, and we're not trapping it, we're not using it, we're not utilizing it for the North. The North of this country should not be in darkness. And there are different ways of preparing ourselves for a climate economy rather than depending on a system. We've got our 10th grid failure in Nigeria in 2024.
Shocking, isn't it?
And we're not looking at renewable energy. And I'm like, where do they find these bozos and put them in these positions? Because they don't get the job done, and they don't get it. You can have people going to the National Assembly and telling them about the line tripping off and this is not this person's fault. But, 10.
So
2 in another country, you'd have been kicked out of office. Industrially, we're losing billions of dollars because our grid fails and people have to go and get their own power, their own independent power. I recently started working with an agency in the government, NASENI, the Science and Engineering, and the incredible minds that are in that organization. And what we've started doing is looking at how we can take some of the things that we have in this country, the lithium, create batteries, electric vehicles. And I must say that not that I want to pat anyone on the back, but the young man that's running that agency is doing an incredible job because they're looking at ways in which we can have an energy mix, a different way of looking at life in Nigeria, and not looking for donors. We have everything we need here. The brain is here, the sun is here, but we're not capturing it well. And I guess the establishment is used to the Siemens of this world and see it as an easy way to just use oil and gas. But I think we're missing a huge opportunity. And if we don't claim that, the US is not going to come and say, come and claim it. You've got to take a position, and we don't have a position on renewable energy at the moment.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question I've asked a number of other people with regard to this US presidential election, about how an unconventional candidate like Donald Trump is able to do so well in American politics. Somebody raised the question about specific socioeconomic conditions that gave birth to his candidacy. And I think people forget that the US has huge economic inequality.
Yes.
And very limited social mobility for people at the lower rungs of society. And those people also want the American dream. Is that what has given rise to an unconventional candidate like Donald Trump?
I think having lived in the US for over 27 years and watched his rise, he fixated himself on that sort of redneck, lower bottom of the society.
The Appalachian.
Absolutely. And he got into there with the Apprentice and the Trump this and the Trump that. And in there, he developed this groundswell of support that he utilized very well in rising through the ranks. And without having a filter between his head and his mouth, he was able to say and do things that normal Americans sort of say and do in their normal day. And that was the appeal of this man, unconventional, draining the swamp. The whole essence of the Trump was to be anti-disestablishment. It is something that also created this January 6th issue, which is very dangerous to democracy. And the biggest fear I see is that he loses and all hell gets let loose in the US. And that is an absolute probability and something we would be...
and of course that also feeds into this fear of immigration. Because if you look at those redneck people that you're talking about, I mean, they claim that, these foreigners are coming in and they're looking and saying, hey, look at that guy, look at the car he's driving.
Yes.
How long has he been here? How is he able to, and how come I'm not driving that car?
Yes, and there's that saying there, it's like, if it ain't white, it ain't right. So they use that, and that MAGA whole thing about Make America Great Again has turned everything against anybody that isn't quite white.
Right.
So we're fighting that in that immigration battle that we're talking about.
So in summary, I mean, what's your abiding memory, your sort of striking personal image of this election, the thing that's going to sum it up for you and is going to stay with you for some time to come? Some have suggested that the assassination attempt on Donald Trump and him sort of being hurried off stage with blood on his face and raising his fist in defiance had become an iconic image for his supporters. Others say it is the moment when President Biden stepped aside and Kamala Harris stepped up and invigorated the Democratic side and made this a really close race. Are those it for you, or is it something else?
I think as a young political figure, having these images of Biden looking a little bit lost and Trump just saying things that are just asinine, I look at this and say, well, these are the images that we see here quite often and we haven't been able to do anything about. Kamala Harris is certainly younger than me. As a friend, I know that she focused on developing herself from where she was in San Francisco to where God has put her now at the brink of becoming a president of the United States. And it's taken a young person, a young female, a young mixed-race person. I mean, 3 strikes and you're out, but she's still in. I think this is fantastic for those of us who also have aspirations to do well for our country, our race, our region. I think the abiding image I walk away is from this is that here comes a youngster, and let's say goodbye to that old generation. And I really pray that, in my own view, the Democrats come out of this in one piece.
And on that hopeful note, I want to thank you very much indeed. It's always brilliant talking with you. Prince Malik Ado-Ibrahim is an international businessman, political analyst, 2023 presidential candidate of the Young Progressive Party. He's now also the honorary consul of Kazakhstan to Nigeria and a clutch of other West African countries. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.